Right now we have 5 generations in the workplace. And it's not that we've never had 5 generations in the workplace before, but right now we have 5 generations where we are handing off leadership roles to younger and younger generations in the workplace right now. And so because of that, there is a real gap in developing leaders in the workplace. So when we talk about intergenerational teams, it's not necessarily just the year you were born. It actually has a lot to do with significant events, or what we call defining moments, that begin to shape how a generation sees the world. And more so, not only how a generation sees the world, but actually how they show up for work. We're able to look back through these defining moments or flashpoints and begin to see that they shape how values emerge, how people engage with the world around them, and ultimately how they engage with those in the workplace and the teams in which they are working on in the workplace. A defining moment for a boomer generation would be July 20th, 1969, the day that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. That becomes a defining moment for a generation for several different reasons. Number one, JFK made a promise that we would put a man on the moon. Secondly, it created a sense of optimism for society and a generation of people who are growing up in the shadows of parents and grandparents who lived through the Great Depression. This level of optimism that begins to emerge and begins to grow out of this defining moment begins to shape how a generation shows up for work. I have been in boardrooms with boomers who have said to me, "We put a man on the moon, we can solve this problem." And it shows how a defining moment can actually shape how a generation sees the world and thinks about things like work. A defining moment for Generation X was the Challenger space shuttle explosion. It was a defining moment for Generation X because we all watched it on television in classrooms. Students were glued to TV because NASA was putting a teacher in space. It becomes a defining moment for this generation because of what came out of that, which was NASA broke its own protocol to launch a rocket because they had all these students looking at it. And then many folks began to point out there was an O-ring discrepancy. And what it did was it created a sense of mistrust and cynicism for a generation because their parents' generation put a man on the moon and we had a catastrophe that actually cost lives. The defining moment for millennials is 9/11. I recognize it's a defining moment for most of us in the West, but for millennials, it's a defining moment because it shook their safety and it caused them to think differently about the world around them. For the first time, it was we were attacked on our home soil. Now, how that's affected the workplace is millennials are asking questions in the workplace like, how safe is your workplace? What are you doing to ensure our safety? How safe is the community that your organization is located in? I have actually talked to millennials who have chosen to take lower paying jobs in safer communities simply because they said the trade-off is not worth it for me. I would rather live in a safer community and make less money than make more money in a community where I don't feel safe and can raise my family.